So yesterday I spent half a day of my life to go and check out Kevin Costner's new Western film. It is called Horizon, an American Saga Chapter 1, and it is the first of 4 movies that Costner has planned. The second one is coming out pretty soon, but this movie has not done very well in the theaters, and it got a standing ovation at Cannes, but people just have not gone out to go and see this movie. And famously, Costner is heavily invested in this film, not just as a creative, he's a co-writer on the whole story. He is the director of the films, he's starring in the movie, and it's an interesting tale about the American Wild West during the Civil War, and it's all about Americans' early confidence in being able to stretch across this frontier land and settle in all kinds of different places, and the challenges that they face with the indigenous populations and just the harsh realities of the environment and being cut off from all semblance of any kind of society that's familiar to people. And so you see a little bit of that struggle, and the way that Costner has framed the storytelling in this movie, it jump cuts back and forth across some time periods. It shows a specific plot of land where people try to settle, but then they encounter some very harsh realities that take them out, and then more people try, and we see similar kinds of things start to happen with people that maybe their optimism gets the better of them. And so there's a lot of carnage, a lot of death in this movie, and there are some good old-fashioned gunfights, and of course there are some fights between cowboys and Native Americans, and you can feel the friction. You can also feel the pull and the friction of the Civil War that's raging, and we get to meet a whole bunch of different characters as this movie bounces around from plot line to plot line. Sam Worthington is in this movie as a northern-based lieutenant who sees this settlement get sacked, and he's trying to keep his people at peace, and he's losing some of his squad mates to the war. They're being called off to battle. Sienna Miller is in this movie, and she watches her family go through some real torment. Kevin Costner plays this loner opportunist who's traveling from town to town, from job to job, and of course he gets embroiled in being a bit of a protector. Jenna Malone is in this, who gets into her own troubles and deals with this family that is relentless in pursuing her to seek their justice. We see Luke Wilson in charge of this caravan of wagons, and they're filled with all kinds of disparate personalities and some friction in there. Meanwhile, everywhere around all of these people is the dangers and the pitfalls of just trying to survive in some hostile territory that is beautifully photographed. I mean, that's one of the most compelling things about this movie. It is definitely an escape to a different time and beautiful scenery. There are some exquisite shots. I was a bit disappointed that the screening that I saw had kind of a smaller screen for something that looks so epic and huge. I really wanted my screening to kind of fill the whole frame of the cinema, and it didn't. It looked almost like a 16:9 print in something that could have stretched out. This would be a lot more impactful, I think, as a 70mm print, but I don't know if that's going to happen because the movie just hasn't done very well. And I have to say that the movie has definitely some cool elements in it, and there's a lot of threading that's going to be carried over into subsequent episodes. It feels very TV drama-like, not necessarily in terms of its budgeting or its scale or the talent that's involved. You see a lot of familiar actors, Michael Rooker, Will Patton. There's just like all of these famous and experienced people, some really remarkable performers that keep popping up in different parts throughout this, and I expect that will be even more so as this series continues. But the framing and the storytelling, it just felt very much like something that you would see as part of Taylor Sheridan's universe, you know? And it's ironic that Kevin Costner left a Taylor Sheridan story, the Yellowstone story, and he's famous for quitting that show, which is a hit show, to kind of go and pursue his dream. But I think there's something incredibly admirable about a person that's so committed to this idea that they want to tell their story. They've got the means to be able to invest in telling that story, and they're going to go out and do it. It's just that we have seen Costner in better work before in the Western space. Of course, Dances with Wolves. I love Silverado. And he's working with a co-writer from Silverado on this movie, which is pretty funny. Lawrence Kasdan's brother, Mark Kasdan. And you can see the bones of some really good craft here. It's just not remarkable. It's not reinvention. It's certainly nothing like Unforgiven or even 3:10 to Yuma, some of the best Westerns that we have seen over the years. It's just okay. And I think that's greatest crime. I mean, this is a movie that asks a lot of you in terms of time, and also with the expectation that you're in it for this long journey. And I don't know how to equate this thing based on the idea that this will be 12 hours of cinema that I will have watched, and whether I will become more invested in these characters. But right now it felt a little bit scattershot. It felt a little bit like Costner was able to stitch together a bunch of scenes that have a generic kind of quality to them, you know, lots of iconography and elements that we've seen in Westerns over the years. He got like new 2024 shots of things that we've seen before, and they're kind of stitched together in a clumsy way. I mean, there is some beauty, and there are definitely, in a movie this long, there are going to be pieces where you're like, oh man, I'm getting into this. I care about these characters. I care about these people. And you don't want to see some of the tragedies that befall some of these people, but of course that's part of the storycraft. I am curious, and I want to see the rest of this. I suspect a lot of these movies won't actually end up in the theater, though, because it's expensive to make these prints and release them out into cinemas. And if people aren't going to the theater to watch these things, and if they didn't for the first one, I don't know how they're going to stick with it for the third and the fourth one. Maybe there will be re-releases or whatever. I don't know what the business is. All I can tell you is that this was just an okay Western experience for me, and I expect way more from a man like Kevin Costner, and a person that has definitely put their heart on their sleeve to build us something like this. I'm going to give Horizon: An American Saga Chapter 1 a 6.5 out of 10.